This Hardcore Justice review was brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Try it, and the next recipient of a hammer shot on impact will be Taz. And he'll take it right in the voice box. So he can never announce another wrestling show ever again. Okay, Hardcore Justice. It's kind of hard to review this one because there were some late-breaking changes that really throw a monkey wrench into big portions of the show, so a lot of this may not have been what was originally planned. Angle's in rehab, so the 10-man tag got postponed, which led to the Tito thing and some of the other matches getting rejiggered, and that's a good chunk of the show right there. So I do wonder how much of what they had planned got scrapped, but the end result wasn't half bad. It did hurt, though, that one of the 2 big matches they hyped up to sell this thing ended up not happening. You see, TNA, this is why you needed to hype the whole card. For example, if you'd pumped up the ladder match more as a big selling point of Hardcore Justice and not just thrown it under the bus in the build-up, you would have had more to generate excitement than just the cage match alone. Now, one thing TNA did that was very smart this week was not trying to cram every single Bound for Glory series participant into a match. They're doing the 4-way thing again. They had 3 of them planned. The way I heard it was that part of the reason the 10-man tag was delayed was so they could put more focus on these matches. That's not a bad way to go. I just wish they'd made this decision sooner so they didn't have to change plans at the last minute. They only did 2 of the 4-ways this week. The 3rd one they wisely saved for next week. Had they done it this week just for the sake of doing all the 4-ways on one show, and this has happened before, they wouldn't have had enough time for anything. It would have all been way too rushed. And this seems to be a problem with the BFG series every year. Just how many of these matches can we cram into one show? And they almost always try to do too many. Better to space them out if it means you can devote more attention to them like they did here. So we had a ladder match with Austin Aries, Jeff Hardy, Kaz, and AJ Styles. Holy shit. And a tables match with Anderson, Bobby Roode, Samoa Joe, and Magnus. Both good matches that got a refreshing amount of time. Though they were arguably a step or 2 below what they could have been, they didn't half-ass it in there. This was good action. Not necessarily amazing, but really good, especially the ladder match. The only real problem I had was with the timing of the finishes, mostly in the ladder match. Roode and Daniels come out. They're out there for a minute or 2 before they get involved, and once you saw them come out, you knew what was going to happen. I really wish that had been shot differently. Even if it was sort of obvious from the beginning that something was going to happen with that, the execution of it could have played this more for surprise than it did. Nevertheless, the finish itself to both matches with the Appletini in the eye, pure fucking gold. Silly? Yes. Hokey? Yes. But classic Bad Influence. Those guys can take stuff like this and make it work. I just took it as them poking fun at the beer bottle finish. It was hilarious. Yes! So the real story here was the rise of this new alliance of Roode, Kaz, and Daniels. Or EGO. The Extraordinary Gentlemen's Organization. Okay, I'll admit, that's a pretty fucking cool name. Not as cool as Threechin, but not bad. The comic geek in me is amused. So with this faction just starting out, and the whole point of it being to change the course of the BFG series, they kind of had to go over here in both matches, and hell, after 1 week, Bobby Roode already moved up to 2nd place, so the angle and this faction has made the BFG series much more interesting. And there's something to be said for establishing a mission statement for a group, and then actually following through on it. Unlike the Main Event Mafia, which was formed so these 5 guys could watch each other's backs, and yet for some reason they have not been doing so, and are now starting to make a lot of the same mistakes they were making before the group was formed, which defeats the whole fucking purpose. Plot hole! Knockouts Tornado match. Mickey versus Gale versus ODB. Velvet got taken out of it for some reason. I don't know why, I don't care why, and I'm not complaining. I just figured someone backstage came to their senses and realized that putting Velvet Sky in a no DQ match probably wasn't the best idea in the world, and left it at that. The match was okay, I guess. I just didn't care about it. I'm sorry. I really hate saying that, but I just didn't care. I was sort of interested in Mickie and Gail heel versus heel as a one-off, but continuing on with this and adding ODB, who's been stale as shit for years, I just couldn't care less. We've seen this all before so many times now, and there wasn't even anything at stake here. They weren't fighting for the title or a title shot. It was just a match that offered nothing we haven't seen from the Knockouts 100 times already. ODB pins Mickie, which was the worst thing that could happen. Please tell me she's not going to go for the title again.
No! No! No!
Come on, TNA. ODB was a horrible champion. Let's not revisit that. Ever. No more runs at the top for you, ODB. I've had more than enough of that.
Now forever leave my presence. Leave this ring. Leave this building. Leave the state. I think you should be exiled from the United States of America.
A surprisingly good in-ring segment with the Main Event Mafia and the Pussies in Leather, setting up the 10-man tag and addressing why Kurt Angle won't be around for a while. And there were two good things to take away from this. Number one, Anderson did all the talking for the heels. More and more, Wes, Nux, and Garrett are just fading into the background, and the show is much better for it. Number two, Magnus did all the talking for the faces. Even Sting just stood back and let Magnus take this one, and he handled it like a pro. I also hope to see this continue. Magnus is about the closest thing TNA have right now to a real, breakout, homegrown crossover star. He looks like a main eventer, he carries himself like one, he's starting to feel like one in the ring, he has a lot of crossover appeal in the UK. TNA have something with this guy, and God bless them, they're finally acting like it.
Yes! 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 Yes!
So with Kurt Angle in rehab, the Main Event Mafia need a fifth team made for the 10-man tag. And if there was a reason why they didn't just go to Chris Sabin with this right off the bat, I don't know what it was. He's been aligned with them for weeks, they've helped each other out against the Pussies in Leather, and yet the possibility of asking him to fill in for Angle wasn't even brought up. Why?
This is unbelievable. This doesn't make any sense.
You can't just leave that alone. If you want someone else in the match, fine, but you have to address this. There's story continuity to consider. Make up some reason why Sabin can't be in the 10-man tag, but don't just ignore it. You have to tie up these plot threads here. So Sting goes to Austin Aries for help. Austin Aries, who was still technically a heel last time I checked, who says no. And apparently Aries was the only guy on the entire roster they thought to ask, because once he's off the table, Rampage decides that, well, it's gotta be Tito Ortiz.
Say what?
That's right. Tito Ortiz is suddenly the only one the Main Event Mafia can turn to, rather than someone with actual professional wrestling experience. Someone like Chris Sabin, who's been working side by side with the Main Event Mafia, someone they know they can trust. If this sounds contrived, it's because it was very contrived, so take this whole part with a grain of salt. So Rampage goes to the ring and he cuts his first real promo where he calls out Tito Ortiz and asks him to be on their team next week. About 75% of this was them pimping Bellator. I'm not saying that wasn't annoying. It was. But again, this is something TNA probably have very little control over. Once you get past that, however, this was actually not that bad. Rampage did most of the talking, and, the promo wasn't perfect. There's room for improvement, of course, but he did come off very natural. The crowd was into this stuff with him and Tito. The two of them reacted well to Bully Ray when he came out. And I came away from this segment thinking, that could have gone a hell of a lot worse. This could have tanked so easily. But Rampage and Tito seem to have a bit of an affinity for this stuff, so this was actually a pleasant surprise, as was how it played out later on. Chris Sabin versus Bully Ray in a steel cage match for the World Heavyweight title. First of all, yay for no Brooke Hogan heel turn. That's always going to feel predictable if they ever decide to go there, so I was happy that didn't happen. Second, we got a good match this time. Much more competitive. This is what I wanted their first match to be like. It's still an underdog with a big mountain to climb, but it didn't feel like the underdog was getting crushed up until the finish happened. And they made Sabin look strong here too. They protected him, showing that he had the match won, if not for the ref bump and the interference. And even in that pre-tape before the match where Bully wasn't sure if he could beat Sabin, that was a really nice touch. Now, the Tito Ortiz heel turn. A lot of people were shitting on this. Personally, I thought it came off really well. I did not see that coming at all. I mean, yes, Tito turning on Rampage was bound to happen at some point, but doing it this soon, in my opinion, is what made it work. I thought this would happen next week at the absolute earliest, so when Tito took down Rampage with the hammer, that was a startling moment. And what's great about this is that you're taking these two MMA fighters who are there primarily to promote Bellator for Spike TV, and you're turning them into pro wrestling characters. After Hardcore Justice, Rampage and Tito Ortiz have a reason to be on Impact that doesn't involve cross-promotion with a struggling MMA company. Before, I didn't really care about Tito Ortiz and TNA. Now, I kind of want to see him get his ass kicked. And by God, that's something. So, Bully Ray wins the world title back. And I'm okay with this. I am disappointed for Chris Sabin. His title reign ended up as, in large part, a plot device for Tito Ortiz. But more than anything, I'm just amazed and thankful that they even gave him a world title reign in the first place. I didn't think that would ever be in the cards for him, and I'm happy that it was. And hell, he still had a longer title reign than James Storm did. But I can be realistic about this. And like I said, Chris Sabin as the world champion was a long shot, and was probably only viable in the short term to cash in on the sympathetic comeback story. And ratings do suggest that there was at least some interest there. That said, probably a good idea to not try to bank on that too long and get out before the Adrian Peterson thing starts to feel manipulative. Reference Chavo Guerrero, who's been using Uncle Eddie's memory to get cheap pops for years. There's pulling the heartstrings for genuine sympathy, and then there's being shamelessly exploitative. Better to end it before one becomes the other. Then who knows? I mean, Sabin might wind up with more fan support from this if they play their cards right. So I'd say Hardcore Justice turned out pretty well. Though I would strongly urge TNA to try to hype the entire card next time. It is very tiresome that this godforsaken Pussies in Leather angle looks like it's being extended now, but that was going to last until Bound for Glory anyway, and we all know it. All this may have been far from perfect, but since Destination X, they've made the journey getting to the end of this thing a little more interesting, a little more tolerable. It's not much, but I'll take it. See you next week.